The morning fog clings heavily to the shores of Lindisfarne on June 8th, 793 AD. An aging monk walks along the beach of this holy island off England's northeastern coast, his woolen robe growing damp in the thick maritime air. The past year has been unsettling. Whirlwinds have torn across the land. Lightning storms have split the sky, and strange shapes like dragons have appeared in the clouds. Many believe these are omens of God's coming wrath. The monk pauses his morning walk, straining to hear something carried on the wind. Through the shroud of mist, foreign voice drift across the water, accompanied by an ominous rhythmic drumming. Guillemots and terns shriek overhead, adding to the cacophony. His eyes, weakened from years of manuscript work, struggle to pierce the gloom of the North Sea. Then it appears, a terrifying sight that will forever change the course of European history. Through the swirling fog emerges what at first appears to be a monster, a fearsome dragon's head with bared teeth cutting through the waves. As the mist parts, the monk realizes it's no beast, but something arguably more frightening. The intricately carved prow of a ship unlike any he's ever seen. Its square sail bears the image of a raven, the symbol of Odin. Along its hull, shields line the gunnels between rows of oars that move in perfect unison, like the legs of some great sea creature. Two more ships materialize from the fog, equally swift and deadly. Men pour forth into the shallows, their appearances as alien as their vessels. They wear glinting helmets and leather tunics covered with animal furs. Their bearded faces are painted in bold stripes of red, blue and black, war paint that makes them appear more demon than human. As their boats grind onto the beach, they beat their axes against massive wooden shields, creating a thunderous din that strikes terror into all who hear it. The monastery bell begins to toll in desperate warning, but it's too late. At high tide, Lindisfarne is cut off from the mainland. There will be no escape and no rescue. The monk can only watch helplessly as his brothers emerge from their sanctuary, only to be cut down mercilessly by Norse axes. The raiders move methodically through the monastery, seizing everything of value: gold reliquaries, jeweled crosses, precious manuscripts the monks had spent years creating, even the food stores that were meant to sustain the community. But the Vikings aren't finished. Young novice monks, little more than boys, scream in terror as they're seized and carried off to the ships. When one elderly brother tries to save a child, a swift sword stroke ends his life, his blood soaking into the beach as he watches his young charges carried off to lives of slavery across the sea. The raid on Lindisfarne sends shockwaves through Christian Europe. A monk named Alcuin, living 650 miles away in Aachen, is moved to tears when he hears the news. He writes to the Bishop of Lindisfarne in careful Latin script. The heathens desecrate God's sanctuaries and trample the bodies of saints like dung in the street. But this devastating raid was not the first Viking attack on English soil. 4 years earlier, in 789 AD, 3 Norse ships had appeared off the Isle of Portland on England's south coast. The local reeve, Biduhard, rowed out to greet what he assumed were peaceful traders. Instead, he became the first recorded Anglo-Saxon victim of Viking violence, cut down in a hail of arrows. It was an ominous harbinger of the terror to come. Before we delve deeper into the Viking Age, we must understand who these raiders really were and what drove them to seek their fortunes beyond their homelands. The term Viking itself requires careful explanation. It comes from the Old Norse word Vikingar, meaning raider, and Viking, which described the act of raiding itself. However, these were not ethnic identifiers. The people we call Vikings would have identified themselves by their specific regions, families, or tribal groups, rather than as a unified culture. The Vikings emerged from Scandinavia, modern-day Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. Their homeland was a challenging environment, where survival required both ingenuity and resilience. About a third of Norway lies above the Arctic Circle, where winters are long and brutal, and arable land is scarce. These harsh conditions shaped a society of resourceful farmers, fishermen, and craftspeople who developed sophisticated techniques to survive in an unforgiving climate. Their settlements were organized around independent chieftains rather than centralized kingdoms. Each community developed its own traditions while sharing broader cultural elements like language, Old Norse, religious beliefs, and maritime expertise. The Vikings were exceptionally clean by medieval standards. They bathed weekly, a practice that actually scandalized some Anglo-Saxon chroniclers, who considered such frequent washing suspicious and unseemly. Archaeological evidence shows they took pride in their appearance, using combs made of bone and antler, often decorated with intricate carved designs and runic inscriptions. The Norse religion was deeply woven into daily life, though it was more focused on practice than belief. Unlike Christianity, with its organized priesthood and sacred texts, Norse paganism centered around seasonal ceremonies, sacrifices, and feasts. Their gods were numerous and complex. Odin, the one-eyed wanderer and god of wisdom and war. Thor with his mighty hammer Mjolnir. Freya, goddess of love and battle, and many others. These deities were not distant figures, but active participants in human affairs. Their stories filled with very human flaws and desires. Their religious practices were varied and localized. In Denmark, archaeological evidence shows fewer physical idols, while in Sweden, runic stones and carved figures were more common. Sacred spaces could be groves of trees, springs, or great halls, where communities gathered for blots, which were sacrificial feasts. These ceremonies weren't just religious observations, but crucial social events that bound communities together and often served as venues for political decisions and alliance making. The Vikings were master shipwrights, and their technological innovation in shipbuilding was perhaps their greatest achievement. The development of the keel was revolutionary, allowing their ships to be both stable in ocean waters and shallow enough to navigate rivers. These vessels were clinker-built, with overlapping planks that made them flexible and strong. A Viking longship could be pulled onto a beach by as few as 10 men, yet was sturdy enough to cross the Atlantic. They could achieve speeds of up to 15 knots and cover approximately 50 miles per day, significantly faster than a mounted warrior could travel on land using even the best Roman roads. Archaeological discoveries have revealed the sophistication of Viking craftsmanship. In Estonia, a ship burial from around 750 AD, predating the Lindisfarne raid by decades, contained 41 individuals buried with elaborate artifacts, suggesting complex diplomatic and trade relationships were already being established. DNA analysis indicated these men were likely from the area around modern Stockholm, showing that Viking expansion had begun well before their notorious raids on Christian territories. The Vikings were also accomplished metalworkers, jewelers, and artists. Their distinctive art style featured intricate animal forms and complex geometric patterns, often interweaved in mesmerizing designs. They worked with precious metals, glass, and even created sophisticated textile works. The sail of a Viking ship required immense skill to produce and was as valuable as the vessel itself. Women in Viking society held more rights and responsibilities than many of their European contemporaries. They could own property, conduct business, and in some cases even participate in raids. Archaeological evidence shows women were involved in trade, with many graves containing weights and measures used for commerce. The sagas tell us of shield maidens who fought alongside men, though this was likely exceptional rather than commonplace. By the mid-9th century, Viking influence had spread far beyond mere coastal raids. Their expansion followed three main routes: west across the North Atlantic, east through the Baltic and Russian rivers, and south into continental Europe. Each path would leave an indelible mark on world history. In 845 AD, a Viking fleet of 120 ships commanded by the legendary Ragnor Lothbrok sailed boldly up the Seine River to Paris. The sight of these swift longships approaching the city walls struck terror into the hearts of the Frankish defenders. Charles the Bald, grandson of Charlemagne, faced a devastating choice: fight and risk the destruction of his capital, or pay the Vikings to leave. He chose the latter, offering £7,000 of silver as tribute. This payment, known as Danegeld, Danish gold, would prove a fateful decision. What seemed a practical solution became a template for future Viking operations. Why risk death in battle when you could frighten wealthy towns into paying protection money? The strategy proved enormously profitable. Over time, the Vikings would extract an estimated 100 tons of silver through such payments. Archaeological evidence confirms the scale of this wealth transfer. 6 times as many Anglo-Saxon coins have been found in Scandinavia as in Britain itself. One of the most significant developments came in 866 AD with the arrival of the Great Heathen Army in East Anglia. Led by Ivar the Boneless, son of Ragnor Lothbrok, this force of around 2,000 warriors represented a new phase of Viking ambition. They weren't merely raiders anymore. They came to conquer and settle. The army made its way north to Jorvik, modern York, then capital of Northumbria and home to 10,000 souls. The city's Roman walls, once impressive, had fallen into disrepair. Ivar chose to attack on a holy day, when most of the population was gathered in the cathedral. The slaughter was methodical and complete. Among the dead was King Ella of Northumbria, who according to legend had killed Ragnor Lothbrok by throwing him into a pit of snakes. The sagas tell us Ivar took particular revenge, supposedly subjecting Ella to the gruesome blood eagle execution, though historians debate the reality of this practice. Under Viking rule, Jorvik was transformed. They paved the streets, built bridges, and established a mint to produce coins. The city became a major trading hub, connecting the British Isles to Scandinavian trade networks. Archaeological excavations have revealed a sophisticated urban centre with craft workshops, markets, and evidence of international trade. Meanwhile, Swedish Vikings, known as the Rus, pushed eastward along the rivers of Eastern Europe. They founded settlements that would become major cities, including Kiev. The very name Russia derives from these Norse traders and warriors. Their influence extended all the way to Constantinople, where many Vikings served in the Byzantine Emperor's elite Varangian Guard. The Varangian Guard became legendary for their loyalty and fighting prowess. Armed with their distinctive two-handed axes and clad in mail shirts adorned with dragon motifs, they served as the Emperor's personal bodyguard for 500 years. They were well paid for their service, and many returned home wealthy men. Most famous among them was Harald Sigurdsson, later known as Harald Hardrada, who would play a crucial role in the twilight of the Viking Age. Around 870 AD, a Viking named Nadod sailed beyond the known world into the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic. Blown off course, while heading to the Faroe Islands, he endured days of bitter cold and towering waves before spotting signs of land. First dolphins playing in the swells, then a raven winging overhead. What he discovered was Iceland, a dramatic landscape of steaming hot springs and volcanic plains that would become central to Viking expansion westward. The settlement of Iceland marked something new in Viking history. Unlike their conquests in England and Francia, here was virgin territory, with no indigenous population to fight or displace. Iceland became a unique Norse society, preserving many elements of Viking culture, even as Christianity spread through Scandinavia. The Icelandic parliament, known as the Althing, was established in 930 AD at Thingvellir, making it the world's oldest surviving parliament. Among the most remarkable of Iceland's settlers was a woman known as Aud the Deep-Minded. Born around 830 AD, she married Olaf the White, King of Dublin, demonstrating the interconnected nature of the Viking world. After both her husband and son were killed, Old took control of her own destiny. She commissioned the construction of a ship called a Nor, commonly used for Atlantic voyages, and led a crew of 20 enslaved men to Iceland. Upon arrival, she freed her slaves and established herself as a powerful clan chief. Her high status is evidenced by the fact that she was the only woman known to receive a Viking ship burial, an honor usually reserved for the most prestigious warriors. Archaeological evidence reveals intimate details of daily life in these Norse settlements. A wooden comb found in Denmark's Vimos bog, dating to 160 CE, bears some of the oldest readable runic inscriptions known. These runes spell out Harja, though scholars debate whether this means comb, army, or perhaps a tribal title. The comb's discovery in a context of war-related sacrifices, alongside Roman artifacts, suggests early contact between Norse peoples and the Roman Empire. Even more personal glimpses come from runic messages carved on pieces of wood and bone. In Bergen, Norway, archaeologists uncovered some 700 such inscriptions when medieval buildings along the waterfront burned down. These messages range from the mundane to the intimate. One stick appears to be from an exasperated wife named Gyda, telling her husband to go home, presumably from a tavern. Another records a woman named Asa, declaring her love for someone whose name is partially lost. Some messages are too crude for polite company, showing that Vikings were as capable of bawdy humor as any other people. The next major step in Viking expansion came through Eric the Red, who arrived in Iceland in 950 AD. Like his father before him, Eric was exiled for murder. Forced to leave Iceland, he sailed northwest to explore lands that had been previously sighted. What he found was an enormous, largely ice-covered island. With remarkable marketing savvy, he named it Greenland, reasoning that the pleasant-sounding name would attract settlers. His strategy worked. When he returned to Iceland, he convinced 25 boatloads of colonizers to join him. Though only 14 ships survived the perilous crossing, they established settlements that would last for 400 years. Eric's son, Leif Erikson, would push even further west. In the summer of 1000 AD, Leif prepared to lead an expedition to explore lands glimpsed by previous sailors. His father was meant to lead the voyage, but an accident changed their plans. As Eric rode to the ship, his horse stumbled on algae-covered rocks, throwing him to the ground. Though the injury wasn't severe, Eric saw it as an ill omen and told his son to lead in his stead. Leif Erikson's voyage would take him further west than any European had ever sailed. After days of navigating through mountainous waves and bitter winds, his crew spotted land. Not just any shore, but a white beach fringed with an endless forest of towering trees. They named this place Vinland for the wild berries or grapes they found growing there, though modern scholars debate whether true grapes could have grown in what we now know was Newfoundland. The Norse settlement at Lance aux Meadows in Newfoundland, discovered in the 1960s, provides archaeological evidence of this remarkable achievement. The Vikings had reached North America nearly 500 years before Columbus. The site appears to have served primarily as a repair station for ships and a base for further exploration, rather than a permanent settlement. Leif's sister, Freydis Eiriksdottir, would also make her mark on Vinland around 1010 AD. Even while pregnant, she joined an expedition to the new territory. According to the sagas, during an attack by indigenous peoples, whom the Norse called Skraelings, Freydis demonstrated remarkable courage. When Viking warriors began to retreat, she seized a sword, bared her breast, and struck it with the weapons flat, rallying the men to stand and fight. However, relations with the indigenous peoples ultimately proved too difficult to maintain peaceful settlement. The Norse found themselves in frequent conflict with the native inhabitants. leading to violent skirmishes. Despite the rich resources of the new land, the Vikings eventually abandoned their North American settlements. Though they continued to harvest valuable walrus ivory from the northern waters around Greenland and Baffin Island, evidence of contact between Vikings and indigenous peoples can be found in both archaeological remains and traditional stories. Viking artifacts have been discovered in indigenous settlements across Arctic Canada, including iron implements, pieces of ship's sailcloth, and even a wooden carving that appears to depict a Norseman, found in a native site on Baffin Island. A Norse penny, dating to the 1070s or 1080s, was discovered in an indigenous settlement site on the coast of Maine, suggesting trade networks extended far beyond the known Viking settlements. Meanwhile, back in Europe, Viking culture was undergoing profound changes through interaction with Christianity. The conversion process was complex and often pragmatic rather than purely spiritual. One account by Thietmar of Merseburg describes Danish Vikings repeatedly getting baptized to receive the customary white baptismal robes, which were valuable gifts. When one Viking complained about receiving a shabby robe, saying he had been baptized 20 times before and always received a good robe, it revealed how some Vikings viewed Christian ceremonies as practical opportunities rather than spiritual commitments. The archaeological evidence shows fascinating examples of this cultural mixing. Soapstone molds have been found that were used to cast both Thor's hammers and Christian crosses, practical craftsmen ready to serve customers of either faith. Thor's hammers themselves became more common as Christianity spread, suggesting pagans felt a growing need to assert their traditional beliefs in the face of the new religion. Some Vikings maintained dual beliefs, calling on Christ for general protection, but invoking Thor for sea voyages or Frey for good harvests. The Norse pantheon was naturally inclusive, happy to add new gods to their existing collection. But this flexibility conflicted with Christian insistence on monotheism, creating tension as Viking societies gradually Christianized. In 1017, a remarkable scene unfolded at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. A Danish prince named Canute, an exceptionally tall and striking figure with keen eyes and a commanding presence, approached to be crowned King of England. The black raven standards of his guard caught the winter light as they entered the stone church. The same church whose wooden predecessor had been destroyed by Viking raiders generations before. Canute's path to the throne had been hard fought. His first attempt to conquer England in 1013 was thwarted by King Ethelred the Unready. Returning in 1016 with reinforcements, he waged a long campaign against Ethelred's son, Edmund Ironside. The two eventually agreed to divide England between them, but Edmund's convenient death a month later left Canute sole ruler of the realm. Standing in St. Paul's that day, Canute represented a new kind of Viking leader, the grandson of Harald Bluetooth, who had united the warring tribes of Denmark and Norway, and whose name would centuries later inspire the wireless technology logo. Canute understood the importance of legitimacy and Christian acceptance. After taking the English crown, he inherited Denmark upon his brother's death. By 1028, he ruled Norway and parts of Sweden as well, creating what became known as the North Sea Empire, the largest Viking realm ever established, and the most powerful political entity in Northern Europe outside the Holy Roman Empire. Canute's challenge was unprecedented, ruling an empire more diverse than any Viking before him had attempted to manage. The Norwegians were considered half wild, the Danes more settled, and the Swedes somewhere in between. Add to this the Anglo-Saxons and the Danish settlers in the Danelaw, and Canute had to balance many competing interests. He could not afford to be too much of any one thing, too Viking for the Christians, or too Christian for the Vikings. His solution was to embrace both heritage and progress. He invested heavily in repairing churches and monasteries damaged in earlier Viking raids, ensuring the monks who wrote the historical chronicles would paint him in a favourable light. Yet he maintained strong connections to his Norse roots and traditional power structures. Under his rule, trade flourished across the North Sea, and a period of relative peace and prosperity dawned. But perhaps the greatest Viking leader of all was yet to come. Harald Sigurdsson, known as Harald Hardrada, Hard Ruler, embodied the Viking ideal of rising from humble beginnings to great power through courage and cunning. From age 15, he fought as a warrior, eventually joining the elite Varangian Guard in Constantinople. There, he amassed a fortune as a mercenary, married a Kievan princess, and returned to Scandinavia with grand ambitions. In 1066, seeing an opportunity to expand his power, Harald Hardrada launched an invasion of England. He raided along the east coast, burning Scarborough and sailing up the River Humber to capture York. But his triumph would be short-lived. 5 days later, he faced the English army led by King Harold Godwinson at Stamford Bridge. The battle marked the end of an era. Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking warrior king, fell in combat, securing his place in Valhalla, but ending Norse ambitions in England. Harold Godwinson's victory was equally short-lived. He had to march his exhausted army south immediately to face another invasion, this time from William of Normandy. 3 weeks after Harald Hardrada's death at Stamford Bridge, on October 14th, 1066, Harold Godwinson's exhausted army faced William of Normandy's fresh troops at the Battle of Hastings. The battle raged from dawn until dusk, ending with Harold's death, though accounts of him being struck by an arrow in the eye, as depicted in the Bayeux tapestry, may be legendary. On Christmas Day, 1066, William was crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey, marking the beginning of Norman rule in England. Yet even in defeat, Viking influence prevailed. The Normans themselves were descendants of Norse settlers, their very name meaning Northmen. William the Conqueror traced his ancestry to Rollo, the Viking chieftain who had besieged Paris 2 centuries earlier and became the first ruler of Normandy. The Norman conquest of England was, in many ways, the final triumph of Viking ambition, albeit in a transformed, Christianized, and French-speaking form. The Viking legacy endures in countless ways across the lands they touched. Their influence on language was profound. The English we speak today bears deep Norse imprints. Common words like egg, sky, knife, and even cake come directly from Old Norse. The days of the week still honor Norse gods. Wednesday, Woden's Day. Thursday, Thor's Day. And Friday, Freya's Day. Maritime terms like port and starboard, from steering board, always on the right side of Viking ships, reveal their seafaring heritage. Legal concepts also show Viking influence. The idea of trial by jury has roots in Viking legal traditions. Their system of organized gatherings to discuss important matters, known as things, evolved into parliamentary democracy. Iceland's Althing remains the world's oldest functioning parliament. Family names ending in son, such as Thompson and Eriksson, reflect the Viking practice of patronymics, while Scottish and Irish names beginning with Mac, meaning son of, show similar influence. Recent DNA studies have revealed the extent of Viking genetic legacy. Approximately 1/4 of residents in the Scottish Isles carry Viking genes. Archaeological discoveries continue to expand our understanding of Viking civilization. The preservation of artifacts in ice and permafrost has been particularly revealing, though climate change now threatens these frozen time capsules. In Norway's Lenbreen Pass, melting ice has exposed everything from a Viking Age walking stick carved with the inscription, "Ivar owns this," to vast quantities of preserved horse dung, painting a vivid picture of travel patterns and daily life. The Viking impact on world history was transformative. Their raids may have terrified Europe, but they also connected distant lands through trade networks stretching from Newfoundland to Baghdad. They were master shipwrights who revolutionized maritime technology, intrepid explorers who pushed the boundaries of the known world, and sophisticated craftspeople whose art continues to inspire. Their complex relationship with Christianity helped reshape medieval Europe, while their legal and governmental innovations influenced the development of democracy. The English language itself is rich with Norse words covering everyday concepts. Common nouns from Norse include window, sky, egg, knife, seat, skill, skin, leg, neck, freckles, skull, wing, gate, guest, husband, fellow sister, birth, thing, law, anger, happy, weak, wrong, loose, low, ozod, ugly, ill, and die. Place names also reveal Viking settlement patterns. Locations ending in by, like Derby, Rugby, Whitby, come from the Norse word for village or town. Names ending in thorp indicate an outlying farmstead, while kirk in place names, like Kirkby, shows a church was present. The suffix sta in names like Leicester comes from the Old Norse word stada, meaning place. Our social and legal structures bear Norse fingerprints. The concept of law itself comes from Old Norse lag, and their thing meetings evolved into modern parliamentary democracy. The tradition of trial by jury and the right to be judged by one's peers stems from Viking legal customs. Maritime vocabulary is especially rich in Norse terms. Starboard, from the steering board always placed on the right side. Port, for the left side, where ships would dock. Bow, for the front of the ship. Wake, for the trail left behind. Keel, for the central beam. Cargo, from Old Norse karg, meaning bird and family names show clear Viking influence. Surnames ending in son, Johnson, Wilson, Anderson. Scottish, Irish, Mac names meaning son of. Names like Ronald, Harold, Eric, and Olaf have Norse origins. Even modern technology carries Viking references. The Bluetooth Wireless Standards logo combines Harold Bluetooth's initials in runic form, while its name honours the king who united Denmark and Norway. In architecture, they influenced the development of specialised buildings like saunas and longhouses. Their distinctive art styles, with intricate animal forms and geometric patterns, continue to inspire designers and artists. Their impact on literature and storytelling remains strong through preserved Norse mythology and sagas. Tales of Thor, Odin, Loki, and other Norse gods have experienced renewed popularity through modern entertainment, while Viking themes of exploration, courage, and adventure continue to captivate audiences worldwide. Perhaps most enduring is the Viking spirit that captures imagination to this day. The idea of men and women brave enough to venture into the unknown, to risk everything for glory and gold, to live and die by their own rules. As the Norse would say, cattle die, kindred die, every man is mortal. But the good name never dies of one who has done well. Through their deeds, their art, their stories, and their blood, the Vikings achieved exactly that: immortality.